We are turning our attention today to a subject that serves as both a specific biography of a musical group and really a broader case study on the mechanics of American culture. We are analyzing the trajectory of the band R.E.M.
It's a story that encompasses a massive arc. I mean, you have to look at a timeline that stretches nearly half a century. We're examining their formation in Athens, Georgia in 1980, tracking their rise to, well, global ubiquity.
And their dissolution in 2011.
Right, but then quite significantly, we have to look at the recent events of 2024 and 2025, which have added a really crucial postscript to their legacy.
So the mission for this discussion is to analyze a very specific set of circumstances. We want to understand how a group that, started in a deconsecrated church, playing to tiny crowds of friends, managed to become one of the world's best-selling music acts.
And perhaps even more importantly, how they managed to dismantle that whole machine on their own terms.
That seems to be the key point.
It's the key differentiator. In the music industry, this is often referred to as the R.E.M. model. There's a distinct rarity in their path. I mean, they managed to stay friends, they retained ownership of their masters, and they ended the band without the usual, the public acrimony or steep decline in integrity.
So even though the band officially dissolved in 2011, the story didn't really end there. We have to look at this as a complete biography right up to the present.
Exactly. Incorporating the reunions and the political activity that have occurred in the mid-2020s, it's a serious analytical exploration. We're looking at their musical evolution, their business decisions, and their cultural impact.
Okay, so let's go back to the very beginning. Let's set the scene in Athens, Georgia in January 1980.
The setting is very specific, and it's important for context. It's a record store called Wuxtree Records. You have Peter Buck, who's working there as a clerk.
And Michael Stipe walks in.
He's a customer. And then this isn't a meeting of two people looking to become famous. It's a meeting of two people who are looking for a specific type of art.
And the connection wasn't even immediate musical collaboration. It was a shared consumer habit. Stipe later said that he was buying all the records that Buck was saving for himself.
They bonded over a shared taste in punk and proto-punk. We're talking about Patti Smith, Television, the Velvet Underground. It's important to remember that in the Deep South, in 1980, this was not the dominant music.
Not at all.
This was a specific sort of countercultural aesthetic they shared. It was a rejection of the Southern rock boogie that was so prevalent at the time.
So through a mutual friend, Kathleen O'Brien, they meet two other students from the University of Georgia, Bill Berry and Mike Mills. Now, Berry and Mills had a different history compared to Stipe and Buck.
They did. Berry and Mills had played together in bands in Macon, Georgia, and had actually lived together. They brought the musical proficiency to the table. Mills recalled in 2024 that their very first practice was at St. Mary's Episcopal Church.
A deconsecrated church?
Yes, on Oconee Street in Athens. And Berry and Mills brought in existing songs they had written from their time in Macon.
But the chemistry shifted immediately when the four of them played together. Mills noted that when they showed those songs to Peter and Michael, they took them to completely unexpected places. Peter Buck was playing a very specific guitar style.
He was playing arpeggios. So instead of strumming full chords to create a wall of sound, which was common in hard rock, he was picking out individual notes.
Which leaves a lot of sonic space.
A ton of space. And Stipe brought this unique sort of keening vocal melody that wove right through that space.
Mills said, "These guys are bringing something to the game. It wasn't just a cover band or a standard rock outfit. Even in that first rehearsal, you could feel the sonic identity starting to form."
And Stipe later commented that there was never any grand plan behind it. They were just fleshing out performances at a rehearsal space on Jackson Street. But it all started in that church.
Their first actual show was April 5th, 1980.
At a birthday party for that same mutual friend, Kathleen O'Brien, held in that church. They played a mix of originals and covers from the 60s and 70s. But at this point, they didn't even have a name.
The list of rejected names. It gives you some insight into their mindset at the time.
It's quite illustrative of the punk aesthetic they were flirting with. I mean, they considered names like Cans of Piss, Negro Eyes, and Twisted Kites.
Provocative, to say the least.
These are names designed to be provocative, or at the very least, anti-commercial. Cans of Piss certainly would have presented some marketing challenges later in their career.
I would imagine so.
Indeed. They eventually settled on R.E.M., which Stipe selected at random from a dictionary. Now, there's a persistent myth about this name that we really need to address.
So rapid eye movement connection.
Right. R.E.M. is universally known as the abbreviation for rapid eye movement, the dream stage of sleep. It's a logical assumption, given the often dreamlike quality of their early music.
It seems to fit perfectly.
It does. But the sleep researcher, Rafael Pelayo, reported that his colleague William Dement, the scientist who actually coined the term REM sleep, reached out to the band. And Dement was told explicitly by the band that it was not named after the sleep stage.
Just a random choice.
Just a random selection that they felt was open to interpretation. It didn't pigeonhole them into a specific genre.
So once the name was settled, they entered what we might call the Blue Van era. They found a manager, Jefferson Holt, who was a record store clerk from Chapel Hill, North Carolina.
Holt was so impressed he moved to Athens just to manage them. And the touring ethos in this period, roughly 1980 to 1982, was grueling. It's crucial to understand that an alternative rock circuit did not exist in America at this time.
They were building it themselves.
They weren't plugging into an existing network of clubs. Mills explained that they played pizza joints, biker bars, gay bars, anywhere that would let them play.
And the financial reality was stark.
A food allowance of $2 per day.
$2.
Precisely. Driving around the country in an old blue van, sleeping on floors. But this built a resilience and a musical tightness in their performance that you just cannot replicate in a rehearsal room.
In April 1981, they recorded their first single, Radio Free Europe, at Mitch Easter's drive-in studio. This was released on the independent label Hibtone.
And there was a manufacturing error with that first single. The original pressing of 1,000 copies left off the record label's contact information.
A complete amateur mistake.
Totally. Despite that, it sold out. They pressed another 6,000, and it garnered critical acclaim, even making the New York Times list of 10 best singles of the year. This attracted significant attention from the industry.
So they recorded the Chronic Town EP in October 1981, again with Mitch Easter. They planned to release it on a new indie label, Dashed Hopes, but a larger independent label.
IRS Records. They acquired their demos, and the band actually turned down a major label offer from RCA to sign with IRS in May of 1982.
That was a huge strategic move to maintain creative control.
It was everything. Chronic Town was released in August 1982 and was praised for its auras of mystery.
This moves us into the IRS years from 82 to 87. This is often described as their cult period. Their debut album, Murmur, released in 1983, is considered a landmark, but the recording process wasn't exactly smooth at first.
No, IRS first paired them with a producer named Stephen Hague. Hague was known for a more polished sound, and he wanted technical perfection.
And the band hated it.
Hated it. They felt it stripped all the character from the music.
Yeah.
They actually asked to go back to Mitch Easter. IRS agreed to a tryout, and after hearing the results, allowed them to record the entire album with Easter and his partner, Don Dixon.
You've described their sound definition during this time as a process of negation. What do you mean by that?
I mean, they defined their sound by what they refused to do. They refused to incorporate the rock music cliches of the early 80s.
So no guitar solos.
No guitar solos, no popular synthesizers. The goal was to create a timeless feel, something that didn't sound like it was made in 1983.
And it worked, critically. Rolling Stone listed Murmur as Record of the Year, beating out Michael Jackson's Thriller.
Which is incredible to think about, but the sales were modest, only about 200,000 copies initially.
Yeah.
It was a slow build.
And part of that mystery was Stipe's vocal style. Those early reviews all mentioned the mumbling. The lyrics were often indecipherable.
Stipe defended this. He said he wasn't trying to be obscure intentionally, it was just how he sang. If he tried to control it too much, it felt false to him. But that did evolve over the next few records.
Right. By 1985, when they recorded Fables of the Reconstruction in London with producer Joe Boyd, he was encouraged to sing more clearly.
And by 1986's Life's Rich Pageant, the lyrics moved from what Stipe called simple pictures or nonsense to more literal ideas.
Let's analyze Fables of the Reconstruction for a moment. That was a really difficult period for the band.
Extremely. It was recorded in London during a miserable winter. The band complained constantly about the bad food, the weather, they were homesick and on the verge of breaking up.
But that gloominess seeped into the record.
It absolutely did. It resulted in these Southern Gothic themes. Stipe talked about old men sitting around the fire, passing on legends. It is a dark, atmospheric record that really stands apart in their catalog.
They rebounded with Life's Rich Pageant in 1986. They brought in Don Gehman, who had produced John Mellencamp.
And Gehman brought the vocals right to the front of the mix. This is where mainstream rock radio began to pay attention, particularly with the song Fall on Me.
This was their first gold certification.
Selling 500,000 copies, They were proving they could be commercially viable without compromising their core sound.
And then came the breakthrough in 1987 with Document. They began working with Scott Litt, who would become their long-term producer.
Document is where the political content really sharpened. You have songs like Welcome to the Occupation and Exhuming McCarthy, which were direct reactions to the Reagan era and the conservative political environment of the late 80s.
And commercially, it changed everything. The One I Love hit the top 20.
It was their first album to sell 1 million copies,
And Rolling Stone put them on the cover.
declaring them America's best rock and roll band. They had moved from cult status to the absolute verge of superstardom, and this led to the major shift in 1988.
The move to Warner Bros. Records. Their contract with IRS expired. They signed a deal reported to be somewhere between $6 and $12 million.
A massive deal for that time. But the key motivation, according to the band, was the assurance of total creative freedom.
And they released Green in 1988. This album showcased a lot of experimentation. You had the upbeat pop of Stand, but also political rock like Orange Crush.
And they embarked on their first extensive visual tour using art films and back projections. They were becoming a complete artistic entity.
Then we reached 1991 and the album Out of Time. This is where they became globally dominant. But they did it by changing the instrumentation.
To avoid boredom, they swapped instruments. Buck picked up the mandolin, Mills played organ. And this led directly to Losing My Religion.
It's so counterintuitive that a mandolin-driven track became their biggest hit.
Mike Mills called it a life-changing event. It charted at number 4 in the U.S. It won them Grammys.
Yeah.
But they didn't tour for this album.
An unusual move for a band at their absolute peak.
They chose to stay home, which just built the anticipation for what would come next. And they followed that up in 1992 with Automatic for the People.
This is often cited as their masterpiece.
They intended to make a hard rock album, but it turned into this somber reflection on mortality. They were turning 30. Themes of loss and mourning dominated the writing.
It featured string arrangements by John Paul Jones of Led Zeppelin. You have songs like Everybody Hurts and Man on the Moon. It sold over 15 million copies.
Again, no tour. This fueled all those false rumors that Stipe was dying or had HIV, which the band had to vehemently deny. But the lack of a tour added to the mystique and the demand for the band.
They finally returned to rock music with Monster in 1994.
Buck called it a rock record with rock in quotation marks, distorted guitars, a lot of glam influence, topped the charts. But the 1995 tour to support it was a time of serious crisis.
It was their first tour in 6 years, and it seemed completely plagued by misfortune.
Bill Berry collapsed on stage in Lausanne, Switzerland from a brain aneurysm. He recovered, remarkably, but then Mills had intestinal surgery, and Stipe had hernia surgery.
An unbelievable string of bad luck.
And despite all of that, they re-signed with Warner Bros. In 1996 for a reported $80 million, the largest contract in history at the time.
And they recorded New Adventures in Hi-Fi largely during sound checks on that tour.
Stipe considers this his favorite album. It's often cited by the band as their artistic peak, even if the sales dipped compared to the previous two juggernauts. But then, in 1997, everything changed.
Bill Berry decided to leave the band.
He wanted to sit back and reflect and no longer be a pop star, but he gave them an ultimatum. He would only leave if the band agreed not to break up. He didn't want to be the reason R.E.M. ended.
Stipe is a famous analogy here. He said, a three-legged dog is still a dog. It just has to learn to run differently.
And learning to run differently was a real struggle. The trio era, from 1997 to 2011, was marked by a lot of experimentation. Up in 1998, used drum machines and session musicians. It was a time of tension and confusion about their identity.
It sounds like a band trying to figure out who they are again.
Exactly. The tension almost led them to disband during the making of that album. Sales declined in the U.S., but it was still strong in the U.K.
They stabilized somewhat with their soundtrack for Man on the Moon in 1999 and then Reveal in 2001, but Around the Sun in 2004 was a critical low point.
The band themselves later criticized Around the Sun as being slower than intended. It felt like they had lost their way, but that failure motivated them. They felt they needed to prove they could still make great records.
Which led to Accelerate in 2008.
A deliberate return to fast, short rock songs. It was really well received.
And finally, Collapse into Now in 2011.
Collapse into Now was expansive. It fulfilled their Warner Bros. Contract. And then on September 21st, 2011, they announced they were calling it a day.
They said all things must end, and they wanted to do it their way.
This is the R.E.M. model we discussed. An amicable split, no decline into self-parody. They released a final compilation, Part lies, part heart, part truth, part garbage, and just stepped away.
But as we noted, the story has continued. There was an administrative era of reissues and copyright deals, and sadly, Bill Rieflin, who had been their touring drummer since 2003, died of cancer in 2020.
And then the recent history. In June 2024, they were inducted into the Songwriters Hall of Fame.
This was a huge moment because all 4 original members, including Barry, performed Losing My Religion acoustically. It was their first public performance since 2007.
The interviews from that time are telling. When asked what it would take to reform, Mills said a comet and Barry said superglue. They were adamant that it was a moment, not a restart.
Yeah, they performed again in February 2025 at the 40 Watt Club in Athens, playing Pretty Persuasion.
And they remain politically active. In 2025, they released a remix of Radio Free Europe to support the organization of the same name, which was facing budget cuts during the second presidency of Donald Trump.
So if we look back at the musical style, what are the components that made this sound so distinct?
It's the interplay. It's Peter Buck's jangle guitar, using a Rickenbacker, influenced by the Byrds and the Soft Boys, but avoiding solos. It's Mike Mills playing these melodic bass lines, influenced by Paul McCartney, often functioning as a counter melody.
Almost like a second vocal.
Exactly. And then Stipe's unique vocal phrasing and his cryptic lyrics, the combination was it was something new.
Their legacy is immense.
They were pioneers of alternative rock. They bridged that gap between post-punk and mainstream success. Nirvana, Pavement, Radiohead. They all cited R.E.M. as a primary influence.
Kurt Cobain was a huge fan.
A huge fan. He wanted to collaborate with Stipe. There's a tragic what-if there. And Tom York has cited Stipe as his favorite lyricist. They sold over 85 million records.
It's a trajectory from a church in Georgia to the Hall of Fame, staying friends and owning their legacy.
That is the rarest achievement in rock and roll, to end on your own terms. And if you think about that decision not to tour for Out of Time or Automatic, that's a key part of the story.
Leaving millions of dollars on the table.
It preserved their sanity, but it also built up this massive demand. So when they finally did tour in 1995 for Monster, the energy was explosive. But as we discussed, that tour was physically devastating.
The aneurysm Bill Barry suffered is just a terrifying moment in their history.
It happened on stage. It brings home the physical toll of that level of stardom. And the fact that he recovered and finished the tour is a testament to their bond. But it clearly planted the seed for his departure 2 years later.
Let's unpack the post-Barry years a bit more. The three-legged dog. Many critics and fans feel the band lost its soul when Barry left.
I think that's too harsh, but they certainly lost their anchor. Barry was known as the editor in the band. He was the one who would say, this song is too long, or this part is boring.
For quality control.
Exactly. And without him, they indulged their experimental tendencies. Up is a fascinating record, very electronic, very disconnected. It really reflects the confusion they felt at the time.
It was a conscious return to a classic sound with Reveal in 2001. More lush and sun-soaked.
Right, but then you get to Around the Sun in 2004. Even the band admits this was a low point.
Peter Buck called it a stiff.
It was a generic record. It sounded like R.E.M. wallpaper.
Yeah.
And the reaction to it, the indifference, was what stung them. They didn't want to fade away as a legacy act that released boring records.
So Accelerate in 2008 was a deliberate corrective.
The title says it all. Accelerate. They played faster. The songs were shorter. They worked with Jack Knife Lee, a producer who really pushed them. They were trying to recapture the energy of the IRS years. And it worked. It revitalized them.
And Collapse into Now, in 2011, felt like a victory lap.
It was a summation. It had the rock songs, the ballads, the mandolins. It felt like they were checking every box one last time. And once they did that and fulfilled the contract, they looked at each other and said, we're done.
The discipline required to walk away in 2011 just cannot be overstated.
Especially when you look at their peers. So many bands from that era are still touring, playing casinos, or releasing subpar albums. R.E.M. protected the brand. They protected the legacy.
I want to touch on the visual aspect, too. Their videos were art in themselves.
They worked with fine artists. They didn't just do performance videos. Losing My Religion is like a Renaissance painting come to life. Everybody hurts with the subtitles in the traffic jam. They understood that the visual was an extension of the art, not just a commercial for the song.
But in the early days, Stipe refused to lip sync.
In the video for Radio Free Europe, he just wanders around the frame. They didn't play the game, and MTV played it anyway. That's the power of their music.
I am curious about that 40 Watt Club performance in 2025. That is such a legendary venue in Athens.
The 40 Watt is ground zero for the Athens scene. For them to go back there, Not an arena, not a stadium, but the club where they cut their teeth. It's a poetic return. Playing Pretty Persuasion, a song from Reckoning. It connects the very end of the timeline right back to the beginning.
It reinforces that they never really left Athens spiritually.
They kept their office there. They lived there. They didn't all move to Los Angeles or New York and lose touch. That grounding is essential to their identity.
Before we wrap up, I want to go back to one detail from the formation. That food allowance. $2 a day.
It creates a bond. When you are starving together, driving in a van without air conditioning, sleeping on floors, that forged the unit that could survive the millions of dollars later. They knew who they were when they had nothing.
And that's why when the money came, they didn't implode.
Precisely. They had a foundation. They had been through the crucible together. The success didn't define them. It was something that happened to them, and they managed it together.
It's a comprehensive American story, from a church in Georgia to the Hall of Fame.
And a story with a very rare, very satisfying ending. Or, I suppose, postscript.
Thanks for listening.